July in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, the conference was officially titled the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference. Heretofore always known and referred to as the Bretton Woods Conference because it was in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. 44 countries attended, and there were 3 specific goals of this conference. Number 1, to create a world currency. Number 2, to create a world central bank. And number 3, to create a mechanism of control of the different economies of all the nations. Because even in 1944, they realized that a great world war would also create a world economy. If you've ever heard of the term Keynesian economics, if I had $1 for every time I've heard that term, I would own an island in the Caribbean. So Keynesian economics comes from the major player in this conference was John Maynard Keynes. He was a British intellect, a Fabian Society guy. The key from our earlier videos, you have to understand he was British. But out of this conference and him being the author, 2 major entities were created. The International Monetary Fund, which stated purpose was to promote monetary cooperation between nations by maintaining fixed exchange rates in their currencies, which we are ultimately going to be getting to in this whole currency war. That's what all this is leading to. The second entity that was created was the World Bank, with the purpose of making loans to war-torn countries. Remember, this is coming out of World War II, and underdeveloped countries, help them get back up on their feet. Whenever you hear about the Bretton Woods Conference, the main thing you hear coming out of it isn't so much about the IMF or the World Bank. It's that the United States dollar became the international currency. So that's what everybody focuses on. And the question we're going to answer is, how did that happen? Well, it all boils down to gold. And our next video is going to be completely focused on gold. But you have to understand, in 1944, it was illegal for U.S. citizens to own gold. But anywhere else in the world, you could exchange your paper dollar for $35 an ounce. That's how the U.S. dollar became the de facto international currency, because so many people held U.S. dollars, and the United States at that time was pegged to gold. Because you have so many sick patients around the world because of World War II, if you have a sick patient, do you want to do a transfusion from another sick patient, or do you want to do it from a healthy one? Well, you want a healthy patient. And there was no one more healthy coming out of World War II than the United States. But as a United States citizen, the concern you should have is, like we mentioned, that the Federal Reserve is not part of the U.S. government in any capacity. It's an independent corporation, nor is the IMF part of anything involved with the United Nations. It was cloaked that way, but it is an independent corporation that answers to no one. So with that, let's go back up to our themes that we talked about earlier as they relate to this entire video series we're doing. Banks want you to create debt. The problem is we have a massive debt overhang. The Fed has not been able to increase inflation. They have not been able to do it because we have deflation. We have not been able to grow out of it. Remember, how did we get out of the Great Depression? We got out of the Great Depression through World War II. The central banks are frustrated with their control and coordination, so they're looking at using yet another instrument of negative interest rates to try one last-ditch effort to get out of that. But ultimately, everything, folks, it's all coming down to this currency war. That's why the Bretton Woods Conference and the focus on gold is so important. Why? Because gold backs currency. But there's a challenge with gold being your backer of currency. There's only so much gold. You can't inflate away a currency if it always is tied to gold. So everything that was coming out in 1944 was focused on gold, giving people the confidence and security. Hey, this is what we're doing. When the World Bank was formed, what was deposited? Gold reserves. But this overall coordination of the different central banks realized that they would not be able to continue this. And evidence of that, all we have to do is look at a quote from the economist we mentioned earlier, John Maynard Keynes. I felt that the leading central banks would never voluntarily relinquish the then existing forms of gold standard, and I did not desire a catastrophe sufficiently violent to shake them off involuntarily. The only practical hope lay, therefore, in a gradual evolution in the forms of managed world currency, taking the existing gold standard as a starting point. In other words, eventually eliminating it as a standard. Okay, so we're going to end this video here. The next up is about the transition in the United States away from the gold standard in 1971. I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching.